All right, welcome to the first of the instructor lectures for History 1301. I don't record all of the material, but I do record a fair amount of it. So if you will, make sure that I would suggest that you expand your screen in YouTube so that you can more clearly see the PowerPoints. And again, you have your study guides, lecture outline and study guides on the overview intro pages to kind of follow things along. All right, so in folder 1, I asked you to take a look at a brief video that showed the peopling of the world, the human migrations from Africa into Asia, Europe, Australia, and eventually the Americas. Let's remember that, as we noted, that once the Americas were populated, really there was no contact between the rest of the world and the Americas for tens of thousands of years. On the map today, we can easily see, the Americas are in the Western hemisphere of the world. Europe, Asia, Africa in the Eastern hemisphere. And so as we start to see Eastern hemisphere exploration, European exploration into the Western hemisphere, it is the old world, Europe, Asia, Africa, that is beginning to explore the new world. And we begin that in 1492. This is a world map from 1492 showing the known world, the mapped world. And as you can see, it's missing a lot of stuff. As you can see, India, for example, is vastly distorted here. Let me see if I can get a better color. Africa, much smaller than it actually is, right? This apparently is, part of this is Japan. There's a lot missing from this map, but this is what they knew in 1492. This is what they're working with at this point in time when we were going to see in 1492 the explorer Christopher Columbus making a journey from Spain. He thinks he's going to Asia, but will bump in to the Americas, the New World. So let's just keep this map in mind. This is Christopher Columbus, or at least we think it is. There are not any authenticated portraits of the man, but this is as close as it gets to people believing that this is what Christopher Columbus looks like. And there's a lot of controversy about Columbus. Was he evil, horrible, awful? Or was he a good guy? Excuse me, doing his job? Or did he just bring nothing but death and misery to the Western Hemisphere? Why does he matter? He didn't really discover anything. There were millions of people already living in the Americas when he got there. But let's understand that Christopher Columbus's historical importance has really never been based on any idea that he discovered America. Columbus is important because in many ways he's the first European who comes to the New World. He doesn't realize he's there, but he comes to the New World, he goes back to Europe, and others will follow him. He's the first of a line of explorers that will, colonize and eventually lead to the creation of the United States. In a sense, let's say he revealed the Americas to the rest of the world. And he's important, I think, mostly because only after his voyages did anybody else follow? Did anything actually happen as a result? That anything actually happened as a result of his explorations? Because, you know, long before Columbus, there'd been so much speculation about far away Western lands, a mythical paradise, you know, that might exist out in the West. For example, the Roman philosopher Seneca wrote the following. He said, quote, "An age will come after many years when the oceans will loose the chain of things and a huge land will lie revealed." Yeah, back there in the year 20, Seneca's thinking there may be more land than we know here. Now, there may be other continents, other land masses that we just don't know about yet. A huge land lie revealed. But even before Seneca, the ancient Greeks, centuries earlier, the ancient Greeks had stories about an earthly paradise out west, somewhere toward the sunset, where people were provided for by the gods, and these people never had to work and they were never sad. And hey, if that's not paradise, you know, what is? And throughout all the centuries to come, this idea of a Western paradise, a Western utopia, just kind of continued to persist in the human imagination. But the earliest verifiable voyages that we have to what was to become North America are the voyages that were taken by Eric the Red and his son, Leif Erikson. These folks are known as the Norsemen. Norsemen live in the north up here, right? They're also known in popular culture as the Vikings. Eric the Red specifically came from the region that we today consider Norway. In the year 985, Eric the Red colonized on the coast of what we today call Greenland. Two little colonies here. He didn't know it, but he's now in the Western Hemisphere. He called this place Greenland, hoping to attract settlers. You know, it's green here, it's lovely, come settle. You know, Greenland actually is icebound. But nevertheless, his little colonies thrived in a sense. And at one point, a trade ship on its way to Greenland, the sailors thought they saw land further out west. And in the year 1001, Eric's son, Leif Erikson, decided to check it out. Leif Erikson will take a party of ships further west, and sure enough, wow, there's land out there, and they're going to settle in for a winter in a place that Leif Erikson called Vinland, Vinland. 3 times they tried to create a colony that could survive, and 3 times they failed, eventually abandoning it. And here's the important part, leaving no written records of what they'd done. You know, we have no written evidence that Vinland ever existed, that Leif Erikson's men had ever tried even to colonize. There's a lot of old stories and songs and poetry and long sagas that tell of Erikson's attempts. But nothing concrete, nothing official, as it were, nothing from him. And all of those stories and poems and stuff were written centuries after they tried to establish Finland. So no one ever followed. You're going to follow a song? You're going to follow a story? Yeah, no one is going to follow Leif Erikson. And so the exploration produced nothing. Now, I said it was a verifiable voyage. In 1963, archaeologists did find artifacts, ruins, buttons, pots, all this kind of stuff that they could trace back. They could date back to around the year 1001 and compare to Norse cultures. Older culture as well, and so they speculate that Vinland was in present-day Newfoundland of Canada, again down here, where my little red circle is. But again, no one had ever followed. Nothing had ever come of that voyage. But over the next few centuries, there will be a lot of changes in the world. Over the next few centuries, you're going to start to see better technologies in navigation, better sailing ships. You're going to see by the 1400s, the populations of Europe beginning to grow. Leaders who can consolidate power as kings over larger and larger tracts of land, beginning to establish what we today know as nation states. But in the 1400s, you're going to have better improvements in the art of navigation. They'll have the principle of the compass. They will have instruments to be able to navigate by the stars. And although there had always been a brisk trade between Europe, Asia, and Africa, it had always been by land. You want to go trade in the Far East, as they called it, in the Orient, as they called it, in China, Japan. You're going to have to walk. You're going to have to take the Silk Road. You're going to have to take caravans and take years to trek from Europe, from Africa into the Far East and then back again. That is a long and dangerous voyage. And so we find that in the 1400s, many Europeans become kind of obsessed with the idea of finding an all-water route to the Far East, an all-water route to Japan and China, to avoid having to spend those long hours trekking over the huge landmass of Europe and Asia. Surely there must be an effective all-water route that can more profitably, more cheaply perhaps, and quickly take us from Europe or Africa to China and Japan, and allow us to make a lot more money. Now, Portugal here, Portugal had kind of taken the lead in trying to find that all-water route from Europe to Asia. The Portuguese had begun taking their ships around the African continent. They had begun to try to to get into where to make it to India. They're not, you know, it's still an awfully long trek, and they aren't going to be able to get much past India. But there are other nations that are also wanting to find this all-water route. So let's note that if you're going to be able to fund an exploration that will find an efficient all-water route from Europe to Asia, you need to be a pretty strongly governed nation. You've got to have a solid kingdom in place, and you've got to have some resources. You've got to be able to pay for it. And in the early 1400s, in the 1490s, there were 4 such nations that probably could have funded Christopher Columbus, who said he had a plan that he could find that all-water route to Asia. Those 4 nations: Portugal, Spain, England, France. So beginning in the late 1480s, Christopher Columbus began to make appeals to the monarchs of these 4 nations, outlining his plan and asking for money, financing, for their sponsorship, in a sense, to make this voyage. Christopher Columbus was a sailor and map maker from Italy. He was described by those who knew him as supremely confident and irritatingly conceited. But again, he does have a plan. Instead of sailing east, like the Portuguese were trying to do, to get to China and Japan, Christopher Columbus believes that he can find a better route by sailing west. And again, for several years, 6, 7, 8 years, Christopher Columbus is trying to make his case to the kings, to the monarchs of Spain, Portugal, England, and France. But he keeps getting turned down. They don't want to finance this thing. Now, a lot of our mythology about America, the stories we tell the little kids, the mythology of America says that nobody would fund Columbus because everybody thought the world was flat, and if you sailed west, you'd fall off. And that's a bunch of garbage. Because for centuries, it had been known and acknowledged that the world was round. Nobody turned down Columbus because they thought that if he sailed west, he'd fall off the earth. The problem with Columbus's idea is that he was underestimating the distance. Christopher Columbus was working with older maps that showed a much smaller world than was reality. And Columbus thinks that if he sails about 3,500 miles west of Africa, right, he will find Asia. 3,500 miles, which seemed doable. And remember, these are wooden ships and cloth sails, and it's going to be a tough voyage, but he thinks it's possible, 3,500 miles. More educated geographers who are working with more up-to-date maps and often worked for the kings and monarchs of Europe were saying, no, he's wrong. They said, no, it's more like 10,000 miles. That if he's going to get there sailing west, they think it's about 10,000 miles from the west coast of Africa to Japan. So 10,000 miles there and 10,000 miles back would probably just about do in the ships and the people on those ships. It wasn't feasible. It wasn't possible. If you're 10,000 miles on water, and what happens if your ship breaks, if your sails tear, how are you going to get food and water? It's not possible. They said it's too far. And so Columbus was turned down over and over and over again. But in 1492, the monarchs of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, decided to take the chance on him. They decided to fund him. So go ahead and give him the money. Let's see, maybe he's right. And so Christopher Columbus will set sail for Spain in August of 1492 in 3 ships. 2 months later, he arrived at an island in today's Bahamas, approximately 3,500 miles from where he'd started, more or less. He thinks he's on an island off the coast of India. And so he calls the natives that he meets there Indians. Now, an assignment you have for this folder is to read Christopher Columbus's diary entries for the first couple of days after he arrives. You're going to see or read about his impressions of the natives, what they look like, what they're wearing or not wearing, what they have to trade, what he thinks that the natives can do for Spain, essentially, what they would, how they could serve, and his attempts to find gold, which of course is the whole purpose of this trip, right? They're trying to find an efficient all-water route to Asia so they can trade in gold and silver and spices and jewels and make a lot of money. So I look forward to reading your journal entry, and again, don't be shy. Write all you want about what you find, your impressions. Again, be sure to answer the question that's being posed, but also feel free to in a sense show me or tell me what you're learning from these readings that we do. Now, Christopher Columbus will eventually take three voyages to the Americas. And it's important to understand he never, ever thought he was anywhere other than Asia. He never entertained in his mind that he has not found the all-water route to Asia, that he's been tootling around parts of islands off the coast of India or China or something. But let's also note that it became rather clear to others pretty quickly that there's no way he could be in Asia, that he must have found something new, a landmass that was unknown previously, a new world in a sense. And I got to tell you, the Spanish were not especially happy at discovering that there was some landmass of unknown size between Europe and Asia going west. But nevertheless, they'd financed it and they're going to try to make the most of it. So in 1493, just 1 year after Columbus's first voyage, Ferdinand and Isabella will appeal to the Pope, Alexander VI, a Spanish Pope. Now, the Pope had a lot of political power at this point in time, especially since all of Europe was Catholic. The official religion throughout Europe was Catholicism. All the kings were Catholic. And so Ferdinand and Isabella persuaded the Pope to issue a proclamation in 1493 that divided the whole unexplored New World, whatever was out there, between Spain and Portugal. Again, Portugal being the other trade power and probably the nation that might give Spain the most trouble if they didn't get a piece of the action. With this proclamation in 1493, the Pope essentially forbids any other nation that he has any control over, Catholic Europe, from New World exploration, right? It's only going to be Portugal and Spain, he says. In 1494, the two nations signed a treaty that formalized the Pope's decree, the Treaty of Tordesillas. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. And take a look at the solid purple line there to see how it was divided. Again, they have no idea about North and South America. They know that Columbus has been, looking around some islands over here. They know Greenland. And so they made the decision to make this the line of demarcation, as it were. Everything to the east of the line went to Portugal. Everything to the west to Spain. Now again, nobody knows who's got what yet. They don't know most of this stuff is here yet. But as you can see, ultimately, Spain is going to get the bigger chunk, vastly bigger chunk of this unexplored New World. In a sense, then Spain has, the blessing of the Pope, in a sense, to explore to their heart's content, and not have to, at least they hope, face any challengers. It's important to note that when the old world met the new, a step in globalization occurred. Now, in a sense, we can trace globalization all the way back to that, to the human migration of people moving out of Africa all around the continents of the world is kind of the first step in globalization. But when the old world met the new, we're going to see an amazing exchange of cultures take place that we're never going to see again unless we ever have contact with extraterrestrials out there that bring their stuff to the Earth and vice versa. Because, as I'd said before, there was no contact between the old world and the new for tens of thousands of years. Right? And the plants and the animals and the germs, as we'll see, in the new world and the old had evolved very differently over those tens of thousands of years. And so the Europeans, for example, had never seen these odd animals that they encountered in the New World. Squirrels, catfish, rattlesnakes, iguanas, armadillos, possums, bats, turkeys, llamas. They didn't have those animals in Europe, Asia, or Africa. This whole thing is called the Columbian exchange, an exchange of cultures, plants, animals, and disease between the old world and the new. It doesn't take place just with Columbus. This is several centuries of exchanging and discovering new plants, animals, and the impact of disease. But they call it the Columbian exchange because with Columbus's voyages, that's where it began. So again, the Europeans had never seen the strange little animals like an armadillo or a turkey. And in turn, the Native Americans had never seen the animals that the Europeans will bring with them. Domesticated animals like cattle and pigs, sheep, goats, chickens and horses. New plants were introduced around the world, changing diets. In the New World, they had plants that did not exist in the rest of the world. The New World has maize or corn, potatoes, beans, peppers, tomatoes, pineapples, avocados, and cacao, cocoa beans, chocolate. Chocolate didn't exist in Europe. Vanilla. Yeah. These things were, once they start to spread around the world, will change diets pretty dramatically. From the old world, the Europeans brought to the New World the domesticated grains, rice, wheat, barley, oats, wine grapes, melons, coffee, olives, bananas. Yeah. Consider our life without coffee. Yeah. Sugar cane comes from the old world to the new. Yeah. Honeybees are going to come from the old world to the new. Oranges, olives. We should note that within 100 years of Columbus's first voyage, corn and sweet potatoes had become staple crops in China. That's how really fast these New World plants were adopted by other cultures. But there was a dark side to the Columbian exchange. The European explorers unknowingly brought diseases to the New World against which the natives had no immunities. Diseases that Europeans had immunities to often would suffer the illness but not die. The natives had never had any contact with those germs before. Smallpox, flu, measles, malaria. Those diseases would very quickly kill natives within a matter of days, really. And before immunities could be developed in a population, thousands will die. It is estimated that over the next few hundred years, as the explorations into the New Worlds continue, that between 75 and 95% of the native populations of the Americas will die of disease. It is that devastating. 75 to 95% of the population of the Americas will die of disease. They don't know they're bringing germs. Nobody knows germ theory. But as we're going to see later, disease kind of becomes a weapon that the Europeans can use as they begin to conquer and take over the Native American civilizations. This is a drawing from the Aztec civilizations in Central America, Mexico. Images from the 1500s showing the effect of smallpox. Interesting to note the point of infection here, viral infection, breaking out in the pox, and then the death that results. The Columbian exchange of plants, animals, and diseases. There doesn't seem to be much of a two-way street when it came to disease. The only disease that scientists believe was New World that came to the Old was syphilis. Sexual contact with natives. 75 to 95% of the native populations in the Americas will die of disease. Now, eventually, we're going to see the Spanish establish an empire. Initially, as colonies, mostly on the islands of the Caribbean. Again, after Columbus's first voyages, many other explorers will follow and begin to explore the New World. The most significant exploration between Columbus and the establishment of the Spanish Empire is the voyage of Ferdinand Magellan. Magellan was a Portuguese sailor financed by Spain, and in 1519 he put together a fleet of 5 ships and 265 men with the intention of sailing around the world, which had never been done before that anyone knew of. Again, they set sail in 1519. You see that, they travel around the tip of South America, head off across the Pacific Ocean. Magellan himself died in the Philippines, but his voyage continued, and in 1522, the one surviving ship carrying the 18 surviving crew members arrived back home. Remember, they started with 5 ships and 265 men. One ship made it back with 18. But they'd done it. They had made the first voyage around the world. Now, in the meantime, the Spanish were getting a little frustrated in their the Caribbean island colonies that they'd established, because what they'd come looking for, gold, silver, riches, all that good stuff, wasn't there. A few will explore into what is now Florida, the coast here. But in 1519, a soldier named Hernan Cortez heard tell of a very rich city in the middle of the Aztec Empire on the mainland. The city was called Tenochtitlan. No, you'll never have to spell it, but Tenochtitlan. The Aztecs were a very powerful civilization that had taken control of a great deal of territory here in green on this map. And the city of Tenochtitlan was rumored to be very, very wealthy with gold and silver all over the place. So Cortez put together an expedition to find the city of gold. He rounded up about 800 Spanish soldiers, native peoples, African slaves. He took cannons and horses, and they sailed their ships from Cuba to the east coast of what we now today call Mexico, Veracruz. They offloaded all the supplies and started walking. Now, on their trip to find the city of gold, Tenochtitlan, they encountered many other natives, some of whom allied with them. The Aztecs did not treat their neighbors well. The Aztecs were brutal. They enslaved their neighbors. They conquered their neighbors. Some of the other Indian tribes are willing to go with Cortez if maybe Cortez might be able to bring down the Aztecs. But eventually they arrived at Tenochtitlan, and that is today's present-day Mexico City for location-wise. And sure enough, the city was extremely rich. The city had gold, silver, all kinds of good stuff. They were a sophisticated city with trade and religion and streets and houses. And Cortez wanted it. Cortez told the Aztec ruler Montezuma, for example, that he had a horrible disease that can only be cured by gold. Please give us gold. First encounters with the Aztecs were relatively peaceful, but eventually, of course, contact with the Europeans will sicken many, and Cortez and his men will take advantage of that, and as well as their technologies, weapons technologies, swords and cannons rather than spears, and will eventually conquer the Aztecs, destroying, eliminating the ruling class, Montezuma and the others, and Cortez and his men now ruling over the empire. They enslaved the Aztec people to continue to mine for gold and silver, and now they're going to be able to bring riches from the Aztecs to Spain. Cortez found himself a fortune and started the Spanish Empire, with Spain now having this large base of operations in, and again, what is now Mexico, to begin to explore further and take further territory in the beginning of the Spanish Empire. Now, other Spaniards will follow when they hear of Cortez's triumph and wealth, and thousands of men from Spain boarded ships, hoping that they too could become conquistadors. They can make their fortunes. But only one found anything as rich as Cortez had found, and that was Francisco Pizarro, who in 1532 led an expedition to the southern continent, to South America, and encountered the Incan Empire in the region of present-day Peru. That's where you're going to find their major cities, but up in the Andes Mountains. But once again, using disease to weaken, or the encounter of disease will weaken the Incans and give the Spanish an advantage to be able to eventually capture the ruling Incans and subordinate the rest under their rule. So with a base of operations, in a sense, in Central America, here, and South America here, the Spanish are eventually going to be taking control of a great deal of territory. Between 1500 and 1848, at one time or another, the Spanish will have control over about 8,000 miles of territory from North America down to the tip of South America. And again, Spain never has control of all of this land at the same time, but the extent of their overseas empire is significant. Spain becomes extremely wealthy then, bringing back the riches from the New World to the Old. The Spanish military, their navy in particular, will be strengthened as well to protect that empire. And so we can easily say that Spain has a monopoly in the New World, or on the New World, in the 1500s. And again, this map down here shows us in green the regions of the Spanish Empire, let's say, by the end of 1500s. The areas here in orange show us Portuguese possessions. Portugal will establish the colony of Brazil in South America Brazilians speak Portuguese for a reason. But again, Spain clearly has a monopoly in the New World in the 1500s, and it's for two reasons. First of all, Spain is the wealthiest nation on the face of the earth by this point, by 1500. You know, all the wealth, all the gold, all the silver that they were able to extract and loot and take and steal and take back to Europe will give Spain will make Spain the richest country on earth. And again, the military power that they build up, the naval forces they build up to protect that empire, will also be strong and formidable. No other nation, no other European nation, you know, that might have thought about challenging Spain and trying to colonize in the New World has as much money or military might as do the Spanish. And the second reason that Spain has a monopoly on the New World is religion. The Pope had decreed, right? The Pope had decreed in 1493 that the New World, for the most part, belonged to Spain. And that papal decree that became the Treaty of Tordesillas. All of Europe was Catholic. Any European nation that tried to challenge Spain in the New World, that tried to colonize on their own in the New World, they'd be going against the Pope. They're not going to do that. But we know that the colonies that will lead to the establishment of the United States were not Spanish colonies. They were English. So I'm going to end it here for this, and we'll pick it up here with our next topic. And we'll see just what happens in the 1500s that will put England in a position to challenge Spain's monopoly in the New World. We'll see you then.